Hi guys, and welcome to the Sleepy Universe channel. In today's video, we will be having a slow journey across the red planet Mars. Part 1. Drifting toward a silent world. Imagine floating through space in a way that feels almost weightless, almost effortless, as if your body has completely forgotten the idea of gravity, forgotten the idea of up and down, and has instead accepted a new state of being, a state where you simply exist, suspended gently inside an endless black ocean that stretches outward in every direction. There is no sound, no engine noise, no vibration, no rushing air. Only a deep, soft stillness that seems to wrap around you like a warm blanket, a stillness so complete that it feels less like an absence of sound and more like a presence of silence itself, surrounding you gently, holding you calmly, allowing your thoughts to slow, allowing your breathing to soften, allowing your awareness to settle into something quieter and more peaceful. Far behind you, so far away that it now feels more like a memory than a physical place, floats a small blue world, glowing faintly against the darkness, slowly growing smaller with every passing moment. That distant blue glow is Earth, the only home humanity has ever known, the place where every story, every language, every culture, every dream, every hope, and every fear was born. And as you drift farther and farther away from it, there is no sense of loss, only a gentle awareness that you are leaving familiarity behind and moving towards something ancient, quiet, and unknown. Ahead of you, barely noticeable at first, is a tiny point of reddish light. At first, it looks like just another star, just another faint ember in an ocean of distant suns. But gradually, slowly, almost imperceptibly, that ember begins to grow. It becomes brighter. It becomes larger. It begins to reveal shape, color, depth. That growing ember is Mars, a world that has existed for more than 4.5 billion years, a world that formed from the same swirling cloud of dust and gas that gave birth to Earth, a world that has watched the rise and fall of planets, the ignition and death of stars, and the slow turning of the Milky Way itself. As you continue drifting forward, Mars begins to transform from a point of light into a visible sphere, not perfectly red, not brightly colored, but painted in soft, muted tones of rust, copper, brown, and faded orange, the colors of iron, the colors of dust, the colors of a planet that has been quietly oxidizing for billions of years, slowly turning itself into a world of cosmic rust. Mars does not shine like Earth. It does not glow with deep blues and bright whites. It does not sparkle with oceans reflecting sunlight. Instead, Mars absorbs light. It holds on to it gently. It feels subdued, reserved, as if it is a planet that has grown old and calm, a planet that has nothing left to prove. As you draw closer, texture begins to emerge across the surface. Dark regions, light regions, soft gradients, long streaks of dust shaped by ancient winds, circular scars where massive asteroids once slammed into the crust, releasing unimaginable energy, carving vast craters that remain visible even after billions of years have passed. Mars is smaller than Earth. Its gravity is weaker. Its atmosphere is thin. And yet, despite all of this, Mars feels solid, real, present. As your approach continues, Mars begins to fill your entire field of view. The curve of the planet becomes unmistakable. The horizon stretches gently outward. You are no longer looking at an object. You are looking at a place, a destination, a silent planet that has been waiting a very long time to be observed. There is no hurry. There is no schedule. There is only slow motion. Mars rotates beneath you. Light slides across the surface. Shadows drift. Entire landscapes pass quietly beneath your path. You glide into orbit, not with a jolt, not with drama, but with a gentle bending of motion. Mars spreads below you like a vast tapestry of stone, dust, and memory. Great plains fade into darker volcanic regions. Ancient lava fields stretch outward for thousands of kilometers. Fractured terrain reveal places where the crust once pulled apart. Massive canyons trace dark lines across the planet. From here, everything feels calm, still. Time feels thick, dense, as if it moves more slowly here. You begin to descend. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just a gentle easing downward. Mars grows larger. Details sharpen. The thin atmosphere brushes softly against you like a whisper. Below you lies open land. No cities, no roads, no structures, only untouched ground. Eventually, motion fades. You have arrived. There is no impact, no sound, only stillness. You imagine yourself standing on Mars. The ground beneath your feet is cold and firm. Fine dust coats the surface like powdered rust. Small stones are scattered in every direction, some sharp, some rounded, each shaped by time. You walk slowly, not because you must, but because movement feels gentle. Around you, the landscape stretches endlessly. Low hills, distant ridges, soft slopes. Nothing moves. No animals, no flowing water, no rustling leaves. Only the faint whisper of dust moving across stone. You tilt your head upward. The sky is a soft gradient of pale red and muted tan. The sun appears smaller than on Earth, brighter, sharper, yet distant. Shadows stretch long across the surface. Phobos drifts across the sky, a small, irregular moon moving quickly. Its shadow glides silently across the ground, then disappears. The silence returns. Not empty, not uncomfortable, but vast. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently. Mars does not speak. Mars does not demand. Mars simply exists. And in this moment, so do you. Time begins to soften. The sun continues its slow descent. Colors deepen. Reds become browns. Browns become amber. Shadows stretch long like quiet rivers of darkness. The air grows colder. Not suddenly, but steadily. Twilight settles in. The sun touches the horizon and slowly disappears. Stars begin to appear. At first, a few. Then many. Then countless. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a pale river of light. The stars feel sharp, close, unfiltered. You walk slowly, each step leaving a faint imprint, a quiet line across untouched ground. You stop, not because you are tired, but because stillness feels right. You stand quietly, stars above, dust below, cold air around you. You become aware of your breathing, slow, steady, gentle. You become aware of your heartbeat, soft, rhythmic. You realize that the atoms in your body were forged in ancient stars. The atoms in Mars were forged in ancient stars. You share the same origin. Different patterns, same universe. This thought does not need to feel profound. It can simply exist, like background music.
The night on Mars does not fall quickly. It arrives slowly, so slowly that you may not notice the exact moment when day becomes night. Instead, you notice only that the light has grown softer, that colors have lost their sharp edges, that shadows have stretched so far across the ground that they begin to overlap and blend into one another, forming wide pools of darkness that rest quietly between rocks and gentle slopes. The horizon becomes less distinct. Distant hills fade into silhouettes. Details dissolve into suggestion. Mars becomes simpler, not empty, but simplified, reduced to essential shapes, essential tones, essential presence. You may remain standing where you are. You may also begin to walk again. There is no correct choice. Both are equally valid because nothing is required of you. The ground feels firm beneath your boots, cold, solid, reliable. Each step produces the faintest sensation of resistance as fine dust shifts and settles beneath your weight, forming a delicate impression that will likely remain long after you have moved on. Not as a monument, not as a claim, but simply as evidence that for a brief moment in the vast timeline of this planet, you were here. You walk slowly, not with purpose, not toward any destination, but in a gentle wandering, a soft drifting across the surface. The kind of movement that feels more like listening than traveling. You may notice small variations in the ground, slight rises, shallow depressions, clusters of stones, thin cracks in the surface where temperature changes have slowly stressed the rock. Nothing dramatic, nothing demanding attention. Mars does not overwhelm with detail. Mars offers subtlety. It invites quiet observation. You may pause near a small cluster of rocks. They are irregular, some sharp-edged, some rounded. Their surfaces are coated with fine dust. Their colors range from dark brown to muted red to soft gray. Each rock has been here for an unimaginably long time, long before any human existed, long before any human language was spoken, long before Earth had forests or animals. These rocks were already ancient. They have experienced heat and cold, impacts and vibrations, storms of dust, slow burial, slow exposure. They have endured. You do not need to pick one up. You do not need to analyze it. It is enough to simply notice its presence, to acknowledge that it exists, to share a moment of quiet coexistence. You continue walking. The stars overhead seem even brighter now. With no thick atmosphere to scatter their light, they appear sharp and precise, as though etched into the darkness. Some stars shimmer faintly. Others burn steadily. Some appear slightly colored, white, blue, pale yellow, reddish, each one a sun, each one possibly surrounded by its own family of planets. Some of those planets may be barren like Mars. Some may be frozen. Some may be molten. Some may, somewhere, hold liquid water. Some may, perhaps, harbor life. Not necessarily intelligent life, Not civilizations, not technology, but simple life. Tiny organisms, quiet chemical processes unfolding in hidden environments. Life does not announce itself. Life does not glow. Life often exists silently. If it exists elsewhere in the universe, it may be far more common than we imagine. It may simply be very quiet. You do not need to solve this mystery. You do not need to decide what is likely. It is enough to allow the possibility to exist, to let the question float gently in your awareness, then to let it drift away, like a passing cloud. Phobos may rise above the horizon, small, irregular, moving quickly. It crosses the sky in just a few hours. Its shape is uneven, its outline slightly jagged. It does not glow brightly. It absorbs much of the light that reaches it. It appears more like a shadow moving against a background of stars. Deimos may follow later, much smaller, much fainter, almost easy to miss. Two quiet companions, circling endlessly, never changing their routine, never asking for attention. You may find yourself feeling a subtle sense of companionship in their presence, not in an emotional way, but in a gentle cosmic way. Mars is not alone. You are not alone. Everything exists within a web of motion, orbits, paths, cycles. Even stillness exists within movement. You may begin to notice the cold more clearly now, not as discomfort, but as information, a quiet message from the environment. Mars is cold. Mars does not hide this. It does not pretend to be warm. It simply is what it is. And you are protected. You imagine warmth circulating inside your suit, a steady, reliable warmth, not excessive, not intense, just enough, comfortable, stable, safe. You may place a hand gently against your chest, not because you need to check anything, but because you are aware of your own presence, of your own existence, of the simple fact that you are alive, breathing, aware, thinking, feeling, on a planet that does not care whether you are alive or not. And yet, here you are. Not because Mars invited you, not because Mars needed you, but because you are capable of imagining this moment, because human consciousness can travel far beyond the physical body, because imagination is a form of exploration. You may stop walking again. You stand, you look, you breathe. There is no pressure to continue, no pressure to progress, no pressure to reach any conclusion. This experience is not a story with a plot. It is a state of being, a quiet awareness. You may notice how your thoughts are slower now, less numerous, less insistent. They arise, they fade, they leave space behind. In that space, there is a soft calm, not excitement, not sadness, not intense happiness, just calm, a neutral, peaceful baseline. The kind of calm that exists when nothing is wrong, when nothing needs to be fixed, when nothing is missing. You may find that your breathing naturally becomes deeper, longer inhales, longer exhales, not forced, not controlled, just happening. Your body knows how to rest. Your mind knows how to rest. You do not need to instruct either one. You may imagine lying down on the Martian surface, not directly on the cold ground, but supported, protected, looking upward. The ground beneath you feels solid, unmoving, reliable. The sky above you feels vast, open, endless. You exist comfortably in between. Solid ground, infinite space, and you exist comfortably in between. You may notice how small you feel, not in a negative way, not in a diminishing way, but in a liberating way. Your problems, your worries, your unfinished tasks all feel very far away right now. They still exist somewhere, but they do not need your attention. Not in this moment. This moment belongs to stillness, to rest, to quiet awareness. Mars does not judge. Mars does not evaluate. Mars does not compare. Mars does not care. And in that indifference, there is freedom. You do not need to impress Mars. You do not need to prove anything to Mars. You do not need to be productive on Mars. You are allowed to simply be. As time continues to pass, you may notice subtle changes in the sky. Stars slowly shift position, not quickly, not noticeably at first, but over long periods. Everything moves, even when it feels still. Mars rotates. The stars appear to drift. Phobos rises and sets again. Deimos follows its slower path. Cycles continue, quietly, reliably. You remain here, breathing, resting, present. Nothing is required. Nothing is expected. Nothing is missing. You are safe. You are calm. You are allowed to rest. Mars continues its endless journey around the sun. The universe continues its endless expansion, and you continue to exist within it, quietly, gently, peacefully.
Part 2. Ancient water, lost oceans, and the possibility of life. As you remain there in your imagination, standing quietly on the cold, rust-colored surface of Mars, you may begin to sense that the stillness surrounding you is not empty, but layered, as if beneath the quiet exterior of this world there are countless stories resting patiently, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be gently uncovered. Mars appears dry. Mars appears lifeless. Mars appears frozen in an eternal desert. And yet, almost everywhere you look, subtle signs whisper of a very different past. Not a recent past, not a human past, but a deep planetary past. A time so distant that Earth itself was still young. A time when Mars was warmer. A time when its atmosphere was thicker. A time when liquid water could exist on the surface without instantly freezing or evaporating. Water is simple. 2 hydrogen atoms, 1 oxygen atom. And yet, water shapes worlds. Wherever liquid water flows, it changes everything. It carves stone. It smooths rough edges. It creates channels. It forms deltas. It deposits sediments in slow, graceful layers. And Mars bears all of these signatures. As you slowly walk across the surface in your imagination, you may notice shallow grooves winding gently through the terrain, like faint scars left behind by rivers that disappeared billions of years ago. Channels that once carried flowing water across open plains, feeding lakes that no longer exist, lakes that slowly evaporated, leaving behind minerals locked into stone. Some valleys stretch for hundreds of kilometers. They curve, they branch, they merge, just like river systems on Earth. Not the chaotic patterns of lava, not the jagged cracks of tectonic stress, but the smooth, meandering shapes of flowing water. Long ago, rain may have fallen on Mars. Clouds may have drifted across a thicker sky. Storms may have rolled over ancient landscapes. Water may have collected in basins. Streams may have overflowed their banks. Shallow seas may have formed in low-lying regions. Mars may once have had an ocean. Not a deep global ocean like Earth's, but perhaps a vast northern ocean covering a significant portion of the planet. An ocean that existed for millions of years, maybe longer. Along the edges of this ancient ocean, waves may have gently lapped against rocky shores. Sediment may have slowly accumulated, layer upon layer, grain upon grain, building the geological archives that scientists now study. As you imagine standing near one of these ancient shorelines, you may notice subtle layering in nearby cliffs, thin bands of different colors, different textures, each layer representing a different moment in time, a wetter period, a drier period, a colder period, a warmer period. Mars recorded its climate history in stone. Because Mars lacks plate tectonics, those records remain largely intact. On Earth, similar records are often destroyed or buried deep beneath moving continents. On Mars, they are exposed, waiting. The question that naturally arises is simple. If Mars had liquid water, could Mars have had life? Not complex life, not plants, not animals, but simple microscopic organisms, single-celled life, the kind that dominated Earth for billions of years before multicellular life ever appeared. On Earth, life seems to have emerged very early, almost as soon as conditions became stable enough, which suggests that life may not be rare. It may be a natural consequence of chemistry and time. If that is true, then ancient Mars may have been alive. Not visibly, not dramatically, but quietly, in thin films of water, in shallow pools, inside porous rocks, near hydrothermal systems where warm water interacted with minerals. Tiny organisms may have metabolized chemicals, may have reproduced, may have slowly evolved, leaving behind subtle chemical fingerprints. Not bones, not shells, not fossils in the traditional sense, but isotopic ratios, organic molecules, patterns locked inside stone. As you imagine standing near one of these ancient shorelines, you may notice subtle layering in nearby cliffs, thin bands of different colors, different textures, each layer representing a different moment in time, a wetter period, a drier period, a colder period, a warmer period. Mars recorded its climate history in stone. Because Mars lacks plate tectonics, those records remain largely intact. On Earth, similar records are often destroyed or buried deep beneath moving continents. On Mars, they are exposed, waiting. The question that naturally arises is simple. If Mars had liquid water, could Mars have had life? Not complex life, not plants, not animals, but simple microscopic organisms, single-celled life, the kind that dominated Earth for billions of years before multicellular life ever appeared. On Earth, life seems to have emerged very early, almost as soon as conditions became stable enough, which suggests that life may not be rare. It may be a natural consequence of chemistry and time. If that is true, then ancient Mars may have been alive. Not visibly, not dramatically, but quietly, in thin films of water, in shallow pools, inside porous rocks, near hydrothermal systems where warm water interacted with minerals. Tiny organisms may have metabolized chemicals, may have reproduced, may have slowly evolved, leaving behind subtle chemical fingerprints. Not bones, not shells, not fossils in the traditional sense, but isotopic ratios, organic molecules, patterns locked inside stone. As you imagine standing near one of these ancient shorelines, you may notice subtle layering in nearby cliffs, thin bands of different colors, different textures, each layer representing a different moment in time, a wetter period, a drier period, a colder period, a warmer period. Mars recorded its climate history in stone. Because Mars lacks plate tectonics, those records remain largely intact. On Earth, similar records are often destroyed or buried deep beneath moving continents. On Mars, they are exposed, waiting. The question that naturally arises is simple. If Mars had liquid water, could Mars have had life? Not complex life, not plants, not animals, but simple microscopic organisms, single-celled life, the kind that dominated Earth for billions of years before multicellular life ever appeared. On Earth, life seems to have emerged very early, almost as soon as conditions became stable enough, which suggests that life may not be rare. It may be a natural consequence of chemistry and time. If that is true, then ancient Mars may have been alive. Not visibly, not dramatically, but quietly, in thin films of water, in shallow pools, inside porous rocks, near hydrothermal systems where warm water interacted with minerals. Tiny organisms may have metabolized chemicals, may have reproduced, may have slowly evolved, leaving behind subtle chemical fingerprints. Not bones, not shells, not fossils in the traditional sense, but isotopic ratios, organic molecules, patterns locked inside stone. As you imagine standing near one of these ancient shorelines, you may notice subtle layering in nearby cliffs, thin bands of different colors, different textures, each layer representing a different moment in time, a wetter period, a drier period, a colder period, a warmer period. Mars recorded its climate history in stone. Because Mars lacks plate tectonics, those records remain largely intact. On Earth, similar records are often destroyed or buried deep beneath moving continents. On Mars, they are exposed, waiting. The question that naturally arises is simple. If Mars had liquid water, could Mars have had life? Not complex life, not plants, not animals, but simple microscopic organisms, single-celled life, the kind that dominated Earth for billions of years before multicellular life ever appeared. On Earth, life seems to have emerged very early, almost as soon as conditions became stable enough, which suggests that life may not be rare. It may be a natural consequence of chemistry and time. If that is true, then ancient Mars may have been alive, not visibly, not dramatically, but quietly, in thin films of water, in shallow pools, inside porous rocks, near hydrothermal systems where warm water interacted with minerals. Tiny organisms may have metabolized chemicals, may have reproduced, may have slowly evolved, leaving behind subtle chemical fingerprints. Not bones, not shells, not fossils in the traditional sense, but isotopic ratios, organic molecules, patterns locked inside stone. As you imagine standing near one of these ancient shorelines, you may notice subtle layering in nearby cliffs, thin bands of different colors, different textures.
Part 3. Atmosphere, Climate, and the Martian Sky. As you remain quietly present on the surface of Mars, with the ancient ground resting beneath your feet and the wide horizons stretching gently outward in all directions, you may begin to notice that the air around you feels different, not only because it is thin, but because it carries with it a sense of openness, as though the space between particles is wider, as though the planet is breathing more lightly than Earth ever could. The atmosphere of Mars is fragile, delicate, more than 100 times thinner than Earth's atmosphere. It is composed mostly of carbon dioxide, with only small traces of nitrogen, argon, and oxygen. There is not enough oxygen to breathe, not enough pressure to support liquid water on the surface for long. And yet, even this faint veil of gas shapes the planet in subtle ways. It carries dust across vast distances. It allows clouds to form. It creates weather. Not violent weather, not roaring storms, but slow, quiet movement. Mars is a world of gentle processes. Wind moves across the surface almost constantly. Most of the time it is soft, barely noticeable, but because the air is thin, wind must travel fast to push anything at all. When dust begins to lift, it does so gradually. A faint haze appears near the ground, then another, until the air becomes lightly tinted with suspended particles. Sometimes small whirlwinds form, dust devils, thin columns of swirling red grains rising hundreds of meters high. They wander slowly across the plains, appearing, dissolving, leaving faint tracks behind. Occasionally, local dust storms grow larger. Several storms may merge. Dust spreads, winds strengthen, until Mars becomes wrapped in a hazy shroud.
In the most extreme cases, the entire planet can be engulfed in a global dust storm. Sunlight dims. The sky becomes thick and muted. Day begins to resemble twilight. Surface temperatures drop. Mars does not resist these storms. It does not fight them. It simply allows them to unfold. Then, slowly, patiently, the dust settles, grain by grain, returning to the ground. The sky of Mars does not appear blue like Earth's sky. Instead, it is often a soft, pale reddish color, a dusty pink, a muted tan. This color comes from fine iron-rich particles suspended in the atmosphere, scattering sunlight in a unique way. But near sunrise and sunset, something quietly beautiful happens. Around the sun, the sky turns blue. A cool, delicate blue halo forms. Not bright, not intense, but gentle. It is the opposite of Earth. On Earth, sunsets turn red. On Mars, sunsets turn blue. Thin clouds drift high above the surface. Some are made of water ice. Some are made of frozen carbon dioxide. They are wispy, feather-like, often stretching across the sky in long, translucent bands. They do not bring rain. They do not darken the sky. They simply pass. Temperature on Mars changes dramatically between day and night. During the day, near the equator, temperatures can sometimes rise close to freezing. At night, temperatures plunge far below -100 degrees Celsius, cold enough to freeze carbon dioxide, cold enough to turn exposed metal brittle. Mars loses heat quickly. Its thin atmosphere cannot trap warmth. The planet cools rapidly after sunset. Mars has seasons, like Earth, but longer, because Mars takes nearly twice as long to orbit the Sun. Its orbit is also more elliptical, which means seasons vary in intensity. During winter, especially near the poles, carbon dioxide freezes directly out of the atmosphere. Dry ice forms vast white sheets. When spring arrives, this frozen carbon dioxide sublimes, turning directly from solid into gas, flowing back into the atmosphere. Mars breathes with the seasons, in, out, slowly. Beneath the seasonal carbon dioxide ice lies water ice, layered, stacked, preserved. Each layer representing a different climate era. Mars stores its history in ice. As you imagine standing beneath this alien sky, you may begin to feel how close space seems. There is little atmosphere to hide it. Stars appear sharper, brighter, more numerous. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a pale river of light. Phobos and Deimos drift across the darkness, quiet companions. Mars's sky does not feel protective. It feels open, exposed, honest. You may notice how the sky alone changes your perception. On Earth, the sky feels like a ceiling. On Mars, it feels like an opening, a doorway into infinity. You do not need to analyze this feeling. You do not need to name it. It is enough to experience it. Mars does not offer comfort in warmth or shelter. Mars offers comfort in stillness, in openness, in silence. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently. The sky remains. The planet remains. You remain. As you continue to gaze into the pale, dust-tinted sky above you, you may begin to feel as though the thin Martian atmosphere is less like a barrier and more like a delicate membrane between worlds, a nearly transparent veil that allows you to sense the vastness of space beyond with an unusual clarity, making the universe feel closer, larger, and more immediate than it ever does beneath the thick, protective blanket of Earth's air. You may notice how the slow movement of dust, clouds, and faint winds begins to feel less like weather and more like a form of planetary breathing, a gentle rhythm in which Mars quietly exhales particles into the sky and then slowly inhales them back to the surface, repeating this soft exchange endlessly across seasons, centuries, and geological ages. In this open sky, where stars remain visible even while the sun still lingers near the horizon, you may sense how small your individual concerns become, how thoughts lose their sharp edges, and how awareness naturally widens into something calm and spacious, as though your mind itself is beginning to mirror the openness of the world around you. You may begin to feel that Mars is not trying to impress you with dramatic displays or overwhelming beauty, but instead is offering something quieter and deeper, an invitation to slow down, to soften your attention, and to notice the gentle presence of existence itself without distraction. As this awareness deepens, you may realize that a sky does not need to be blue to be beautiful, that clouds do not need to bring rain to be meaningful, and that a world does not need to support forests or oceans in order to hold profound significance within the vast story of the universe. And so you remain here beneath this thin, ancient sky, breathing slowly, calmly, gently, allowing the quiet atmosphere of Mars to surround you, holding you within a moment that requires nothing from you except simple, peaceful presence.
Part 4. Mountains, volcanoes, and endless canyons. As the pale Martian morning slowly spreads across the surface and the soft glow of distant sunlight begins to touch the edges of ancient rocks and broad plains, you may start to notice how this world reveals its immense structures not through sudden drama, but through gradual unfolding, as though Mars prefers to show its greatness quietly, piece by piece, over time. Mars is a planet shaped by fire, not the violent, explosive fire of sudden destruction, but the slow, persistent fire of volcanic activity that once flowed across vast regions of the surface. Long ago, Mars possessed a warmer interior. Its mantle held more heat, its crust was thinner, magma rose more easily, volcanoes formed, not in chains like on Earth, but in immense clusters. The greatest of these clusters is known as the Tharsis region, a massive bulge in the crust, so large that it altered the shape of the planet itself. Within this region stands Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in the solar system. Olympus Mons is not steep. It does not rise sharply like Earth's mountains. Its slopes are gentle, wide, almost deceptively smooth. It rises approximately 22 kilometers above the surrounding plains, so tall that its summit curves beyond the horizon. You could stand at its base and never see the top. Olympus Mons was built slowly, layer by layer, flow by flow, over millions of years. Because Mars lacks active plate tectonics, magma continued to rise from the same location repeatedly, allowing lava to pile up into a colossal shield volcano. Today, Olympus Mons is quiet. No eruptions, no glowing lava, no rumbling, only silent rock. But its immense size still speaks of a time when Mars was internally alive. Nearby stand other enormous volcanoes, Ascraeus Mons, Pavonis Mons, Arsia Mons, each one larger than any volcano on Earth. Together, they form a chain of giants, resting quietly. Beyond the volcanic plateaus lies one of the most astonishing geological features in the solar system, Valles Marineris, a canyon system so vast that it stretches over 4,000 kilometers, up to 7 kilometers deep, wide enough to swallow entire nations. Valles Marineris is not a single canyon. It is a complex network of chasms, valleys, collapsed blocks, and steep cliffs, formed primarily by tectonic stretching as the Tharsis region swelled and cracked the crest. Over time, wind and possibly ancient water further shaped its walls. If you imagine standing at the edge of this canyon, you may see layered rock exposed along the cliffs, each layer representing a different era, different environmental conditions, different moments in Mars's long history. The depths remain shadowed, cool, still. Mars's mountains are not shaped by colliding continents. They are shaped by internal heat, by uplift, by impact, by fracture. Impact craters dot the landscape everywhere, some small, some enormous, some filled with sediment, some with central peaks, each marking a moment of violent collision long ago. Yet now they rest quietly. Mars has not erased its scars, it preserves them. Mars remembers. As you imagine slowly walking across these immense landscapes, you may begin to feel the scale of time pressing gently against your awareness. The rocks beneath your feet are older than complex life on Earth. The cliffs before you have stood for billions of years. The dust drifting in the thin wind has been lifted and resettled countless times. Mars feels ancient, not in a dramatic way, but in a calm, enduring way. Mars does not overwhelm with motion, it overwhelms with stillness, with endurance, with scale. As sunlight moves across slopes and into deep canyon shadows, subtle variations in color become visible. Reds, browns, grays, soft oranges, each color reflecting different minerals, different compositions, different histories. Mars is a world painted in muted tones. Nothing is bright, nothing is loud. Everything feels subdued, contemplative. The mountains do not demand attention, the canyons do not call out, they simply exist. As you remain there, breathing slowly, calmly, gently, you may begin to sense that these immense structures are not obstacles, they are not challenges, they are expressions. Expressions of a planet that once had energy, that once moved, that once changed dramatically. And though that energy has mostly faded, its fingerprints remain everywhere. Mars is not dead. Mars is resting, cooling, evolving at a pace far beyond human perception, and you are witnessing a quiet moment within that immense timeline. As you continue to contemplate these vast mountains and immeasurable canyons, you may begin to feel how their scale is not meant to impress or intimidate, but rather to gently remind you that the universe builds its creations slowly, patiently, and without hurry, allowing immense forms to emerge through countless small processes repeated over incomprehensible stretches of time. You may sense that every layer of exposed rock along a canyon wall is quietly holding a memory of ancient heat, ancient pressure, ancient motion, and that these memories are not locked away, but openly displayed for anyone willing to look slowly and gently enough. In this awareness, the idea of a mountain transforms from something to be climbed into something to be quietly acknowledged, and the idea of a canyon transforms from something to be crossed into something to be peacefully observed. You may notice how your own thoughts begin to slow in the presence of such ancient stillness, as though your mind is gradually synchronizing with the slow rhythm of geological time. Nothing here is in a hurry, and nothing needs to be. And so you remain here, softly breathing, gently aware, resting in the presence of a world shaped by fire and fracture, uplift and collapse, silence and time.
Part 5. The Moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos. As you remain quietly present on the surface of Mars, with the vast plain resting around you and the pale sky stretching gently overhead, you may begin to notice that this silent world is not entirely alone, that it is accompanied by two small companions that move endlessly through the darkness, circling their parent planet in steady, ancient paths. These companions are Phobos and Deimos. They are not large, they are not bright, they do not dominate the sky, they do not glow like Earth's moon. They are small, irregular, dark, more like wandering stones than traditional moons. Phobos is the larger of the two. It measures only about 22 kilometers across. From a distance, it appears misshapen, uneven, scarred. Its surface is covered with craters, grooves, and fractures. One enormous crater, Stickney, covers much of one side of Phobos. The impact that created it was so powerful that it nearly shattered the entire moon. Cracks radiate outward from this crater like frozen lightning. Phobos is fragile. It is likely a loose collection of rocks and dust held together gently by gravity, not a solid monolith, more like a cosmic rubble pile. Phobos orbits Mars extremely close, so close that it rises in the west and sets in the east, the opposite direction of most moons. It completes one orbit in just over 7 hours, which means that from the surface of Mars, Phobos can be seen crossing the sky multiple times in a single day. It moves quickly, quietly, like a silent shadow gliding overhead. Deimos is smaller, more distant, more gently shaped, about 12 kilometers across. It appears smoother than Phobos, more rounded, but still far from spherical. Deimos orbits Mars more slowly. From the surface, it appears as a faint point of light drifting gradually across the sky, easy to overlook, easy to miss, yet always present. The origins of these two moons are still uncertain. They may be captured asteroids. They may be fragments from a larger body that once orbited Mars. They may be remnants of debris created by an ancient impact. Mars does not reveal this story easily. It keeps some of its history quiet. Phobos is slowly spiraling inward toward Mars. Tidal forces are pulling it closer, millimeter by millimeter, year by year. Millions of years from now, Phobos may break apart. Its fragments may form a thin ring around Mars, or they may rain down onto the surface. Even moons are temporary. Even orbits change. Deimos, by contrast, is slowly drifting farther away, very gradually, very quietly. The two moons move in opposite long-term directions, one falling inward, one drifting outward, both following the gentle mathematics of gravity. As you imagine standing beneath the Martian sky during twilight, you may see Phobos rise, small, dark, irregular. It moves faster than any moon you have ever seen. Its shadow may briefly slide across the surface, then vanish. Later, Deimos appears, fainter, slower, more subtle. Two small travelers keeping silent watch. Unlike Earth's moon, which strongly influences tides and stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, Phobos and Deimos exert only weak effects on Mars. They do not shape oceans. They do not strongly influence climate. They simply orbit, quietly, endlessly. Yet their presence adds a subtle sense of companionship to an otherwise solitary world. Mars has two witnesses, two ancient companions that have circled it through eras of warmth and cold, through volcanic fire and long ages of silence. They have watched Mars change. They have watched its atmosphere thin. They have watched its water disappear from the surface. They will likely continue to watch long after humanity has changed beyond recognition. As you look up at these small moons, you may begin to feel a gentle sense of continuity, a sense that motion never truly stops, that cycles persist, that even in silence, the universe is always moving. You do not need to analyze their paths. You do not need to calculate their orbits. It is enough to simply notice them, small shapes moving through darkness, quiet companions in an endless night. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently. Mars remains beneath your feet. Phobos and Deimos remain overhead. The universe continues its quiet unfolding, and you remain here, present, aware, resting. As you continue to watch these two small moons drifting through the Martian sky, you may begin to feel how their quiet, repetitive motion mirrors the larger rhythm of the universe itself, where countless objects move in endless cycles, circling, drifting, approaching, separating, all without intention, all without awareness, yet together forming the vast, slow choreography of cosmic existence. You may sense that Phobos and Deimos do not need to be large or bright to be meaningful, because meaning does not arise from size or spectacle, but from participation in the simple fact of being, in the quiet act of existing within the grand unfolding of space and time. In this awareness, you may notice how companionship does not always require conversation, touch, or understanding, but can exist simply as shared presence, as bodies moving through the same darkness, beneath the same stars, bound together by gravity and chance. You may feel a gentle comfort in knowing that even on a cold, silent world, nothing truly exists in isolation, that every planet has companions, every star has neighbors, and every point in space is connected through invisible threads of force and motion. As your thoughts soften, you may realize that you too are a quiet companion within this universe, moving through time in your own small orbit, witnessing, breathing, existing, without needing to justify your presence. And so you remain here, beneath two small wandering moons, breathing slowly, calmly, gently, resting within a moment that asks nothing of you except simple, peaceful awareness. As you continue to watch these two small moons drifting slowly and endlessly through the Martian sky, you may begin to sense how their steady, unhurried motion is not merely an orbital path traced through space, but a quiet demonstration of how the universe itself prefers continuity over spectacle, repetition over drama, and gradual transformation over sudden change. And as you follow Phobos in its swift crossing and Deimos in its softer, more distant glide, you may begin to feel how their movement becomes almost hypnotic, like a silent pendulum swinging across the vast dome of stars, reminding you that nothing in existence truly stands still, that even in apparent stillness there is motion, and that every object, no matter how small or irregular, participates in the great unbroken flow of gravity and time that binds galaxies, stars, planets, and even your own thoughts into a single continuous unfolding. You may notice that these moons, though modest in size and dim in brightness, carry a quiet dignity in their persistence, for they do not need brilliance to justify their existence, nor grandeur to validate their presence, but instead simply continue in their paths, circling Mars through ages of warmth and cold, through eras of volcanic fire and deep planetary silence, bearing witness to changes that unfolded long before human curiosity ever turned its gaze outward. And in doing so, they gently suggest that significance in the cosmos is not measured by size, luminosity, or dominance, but by endurance, by participation, by the simple act of continuing to move within the web of forces that shapes everything that is.
As your attention lingers on the subtle arc traced by Phobos as it rises and sets in a single Martian day, and then drifts toward the more distant and patient movement of Deimos as it glides quietly against the backdrop of countless stars, you may begin to feel how companionship in the universe does not require sound, communication, or recognition, but can exist simply through shared orbit, shared gravity, shared presence within the same stretch of space. And in that awareness, you may realize that even the most silent bodies in the cosmos are never entirely alone, because they are held within invisible relationships of attraction and motion that tie them gently to one another across unimaginable distances. You may find that as these moons continue their endless circulation above you, your own sense of isolation softens, because their quiet persistence becomes a subtle reminder that you, too, are moving within your own orbit through time, held by forces both visible and unseen, influenced by histories and connections that stretch backward and forward beyond your immediate perception. And just as Phobos and Deimos do not question their paths or resist their motion, you may begin to feel a similar easing within yourself, a gentle acceptance of the rhythm that carries you through your own life without the need to force direction or demand certainty. As this awareness deepens, you may sense that gravity itself is not merely a physical force pulling objects together, but a quiet metaphor for connection, a reminder that everything that exists is subtly drawn towards something else, that nothing stands entirely independent, that even the smallest moon is bound to its planet, and even the smallest thought is shaped by the vast architecture of the mind. And within this recognition, you may begin to feel a calm reassurance, knowing that your presence, like the presence of these moons, is part of a larger pattern that does not require explanation in order to be meaningful. And so, beneath the dark and open Martian sky, where two small companions trace their ancient paths without interruption or complaint, you remain quietly aware of their motion and of your own gentle breathing, sensing how the slow passage of time becomes less something to measure and more something to inhabit, less a sequence of seconds and more a soft continuum through which you drift peacefully, held within the same universal fabric that guides moons around planets and planets around stars, allowing yourself to rest within this immense patient rhythm where nothing demands urgency and everything unfolds exactly as it must. As you continue to rest within this vast stillness, you may begin to feel how the idea of direction slowly loses its importance, how forward and backward, past and future, near and far all soften into a single spacious awareness, where you are no longer moving toward anything in particular, but are instead gently floating within an endless present moment. And in this floating, you may sense how the universe does not rush its creations, does not hurry its transformations, but allows everything from drifting moons to evolving stars to quiet human thoughts to unfold at precisely the pace required by the deep and patient laws that govern existence itself. You may notice that as your attention widens and becomes less focused on individual details, a subtle peace begins to spread through your awareness. Not the kind of peace that comes from achieving something or solving something, but the kind that arises naturally when you realize that nothing is broken, that nothing is missing, and that the simple act of being conscious within this vast cosmos is already complete in itself, requiring no improvement, no justification, and no destination beyond this quiet moment. And as these realizations settle softly into the background of your mind, like fine dust drifting slowly toward the surface of an ancient world, you may find yourself sinking deeper into rest, allowing thoughts to dissolve into gentle impressions, allowing images to blur into softness, and allowing your awareness to drift like a small, weightless presence through a universe that holds you without effort, without condition, and without demand.
Part 6. Robots exploring the surface. As you remain quietly present beneath the wide Martian sky, with the faint outline of distant hills resting softly along the horizon and the cold dust lying undisturbed around your feet, you may begin to sense that although this world appears empty, it is not untouched, for small, patient explorers move slowly across its surface. Machines built not for speed or spectacle, but for observation, for listening, for learning. Long before any human foot ever pressed into Martian soil, robotic explorers arrived. They did not arrive suddenly. They did not arrive easily. They arrived after years of planning, calculation, and quiet hope. From Earth, engineers guided these machines across tens of millions of kilometers, navigating delicate gravitational pathways, making tiny corrections over vast distances, until finally the rovers entered the thin Martian atmosphere and descended gently toward the surface. Some arrived protected by heat shields. Some deployed parachutes. Some used small rockets to slow their fall. In recent missions, hovering sky cranes lowered rovers gently on cables as though placing fragile instruments onto ancient ground with careful hands. These machines are compact, sturdy, designed to survive cold nights, dust storms, and long periods of isolation. They move slowly, deliberately, often only a few meters per day. They pause frequently. They observe. They measure. They record. Cameras mounted on tall masts capture panoramic views. Microscopic imagers examine tiny grains of soil. Spectrometers analyze mineral composition. Drills penetrate rock and collect powdered samples. Seismometers listen for faint vibrations inside the planet. Weather stations measure temperature, pressure, and wind. These robots do not feel curiosity. They do not feel wonder. But they are expressions of human curiosity. They are extensions of human awareness. They are how humanity gently reaches outward. Some rovers have far exceeded their planned lifetimes. Built to last months, they have operated for years, enduring freezing temperatures, enduring dust accumulation, enduring mechanical wear. They persist quietly. Wheel tracks form faint lines across plains and craters. These tracks may remain visible for decades. Mars does not erase quickly. In some regions, rovers have discovered ancient river deltas, layered sediments, clay-rich rocks, minerals that form only in water, clues pointing toward a wetter past. Some missions have detected complex organic molecules, not proof of life, but building blocks, possibilities. One rover carried a small helicopter, a delicate experimental craft. It lifted briefly into the thin air, hovering, then settling back onto the ground. A quiet demonstration that even flight is possible here. These machines do not conquer Mars. They listen to Mars. They read its surface like a slow, patient book, page by page, layer by layer, bit by bit. As you imagine standing quietly near one of these rovers, you may hear only the faint hum of motors adjusting position, perhaps the soft crunch of wheels against rock. Most of the time, there is silence. The rover rests, solar panels angled toward the sun, antennas pointed toward the sky, waiting, working, persisting. Mars remains vast, unchanged, but through these machines, Mars becomes known, not fully, never fully, but more clearly than before. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently. Robots continue their patient work, and you remain here, present, aware, resting. As you imagine these small machines continuing their slow journeys across endless plains and ancient crater floors, you may begin to feel how their movement is less about reaching destinations and more about participating in a quiet process of listening, a process in which every wheel rotation, every paused observation, and every transmitted signal becomes part of a gentle conversation between human curiosity and an indifferent but endlessly fascinating world. You may sense that these rovers do not rush because Mars itself does not rush, and in matching the planet's pace, they become reflections of its patience, showing that understanding is not achieved through speed, but through presence, repetition, and the willingness to remain attentive over long periods of time. As this awareness settles in, You may notice how your own desire to hurry, to finish, or to reach conclusions begins to soften, replaced by a quieter appreciation for simply observing what is, without needing to change it or define it. You may begin to feel that these rovers, though made of metal and wires, are carrying something gentle within them. Not emotion, not intention, but the accumulated hope of countless humans who looked at Mars and wondered what stories its rocks might tell. In this sense, every image sent back to Earth is not merely data, but a small gift, a fragment of another world offered quietly across millions of kilometers of space. And so you remain here, beneath the open Martian sky, breathing slowly, calmly, gently, aware that discovery does not always arrive as a sudden revelation, but often as a slow, patient unfolding.
As you remain quietly present beneath the immense and open Martian sky, where the thin atmosphere allows distant starlight to remain visible even while faint traces of twilight still linger near the horizon, you may begin to sense that the surface of this planet, though appearing empty at first glance, is in fact quietly shared with small mechanical travelers whose purpose is not conquest or domination, but careful observation, patient listening, and the slow accumulation of understanding across time. Long before any human body will ever step onto this rust-colored ground, small robotic explorers were gently placed here after journeys that spanned tens of millions of kilometers through the silent vacuum of space, journeys guided by countless calculations, tiny course corrections, and years of careful planning, all carried out by human minds on a distant blue world who wished simply to know this place a little better. These machines did not arrive dramatically, and they did not announce themselves with spectacle, but instead descended carefully through the thin Martian atmosphere using heat shields, parachutes, and controlled bursts of rocket thrust, allowing them to settle onto the ancient surface as softly as possible, as though respecting the immense age and quiet dignity of the world they were about to begin exploring. Once on the ground, these robotic explorers began their slow, deliberate movements, rolling across plains, navigating around rocks, climbing gentle slopes, and pausing frequently to observe their surroundings, not because they are uncertain, but because careful attention is the foundation of their existence. Every small movement they make is planned, every turn of a wheel is considered, every drill operation is calculated, because Mars does not forgive carelessness, and so these machines move at the pace of patience. They carry cameras mounted on slender masts that rise above their bodies, allowing them to capture wide panoramic views of the surrounding landscape, images that are later transmitted across millions of kilometers of space and received on Earth as quiet glimpses into another world. They carry microscopic imagers that examine individual grains of soil. They carry spectrometers that read the chemical signatures of rock. They carry drills that grind into stone and collect fine powder. They carry seismometers that listen for faint vibrations traveling through the planet's interior. They carry weather sensors that monitor temperature, pressure, and wind. Together, these instruments allow the rovers to read Mars like a slow, ancient book, one page at a time. These machines do not feel curiosity, they do not feel wonder, they do not feel loneliness, and yet they are expressions of human curiosity. They are physical manifestations of a species that looks at distant points of light in the sky and wonders what lies there. Some of these rovers were designed to function for only a few months, and yet they continued to operate for many years, surviving freezing nights, dust storms, mechanical wear, and the slow accumulation of fine red dust that settles on every exposed surface. Their endurance is quiet, uncelebrated, steady. Wheel tracks stretch across plains and crater floors, forming faint lines that may remain visible for decades because Mars erases slowly, and in those faint lines exists a subtle record of exploration, not loud, not intrusive, but gentle. If you imagine standing quietly near one of these machines, you may notice that there is no constant movement, no frantic activity, no sense of urgency, but rather long periods of stillness punctuated by brief moments of motion, as though the rover itself has adopted the slow breathing rhythm of the planet. Most of the time, it rests, solar panels angled toward the sun, antennas pointed toward the sky, waiting for instructions, waiting to transmit data, waiting patiently. Mars remains vast, unchanged, but through these machines, Mars becomes known, not fully, not completely, but a little more clearly than before. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently, and you remain here. As you continue to imagine these small robotic explorers resting quietly beneath the open Martian sky, you may begin to feel how their existence is not defined by motion alone, but by patience, by their willingness to remain in one place for long periods of time, simply observing, simply listening, simply allowing the planet to reveal itself in subtle ways. And in this patience, you may sense a reflection of the deeper rhythm of the universe itself, where stars burn for billions of years, where planets cool over incomprehensible spans of time, where galaxies drift slowly apart, and where nothing meaningful is ever truly rushed, but instead unfolds according to laws that favor steadiness, continuity, and quiet persistence. You may notice how the idea of exploration begins to transform from an image of bold movement and dramatic discovery into something far softer and more contemplative, where to explore is not necessarily to travel great distances, but to remain present with what is already before you, to observe the texture of a single rock, the pattern of dust around a small depression, the gentle slope of a distant ridge, and to realize that within these seemingly simple details exist stories that stretch back billions of years, stories written not in words, but in layers, fractures, and chemical traces that quietly record the history of a world that has been changing slowly since long before life appeared on Earth. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to sense that these robots are not merely machines moving across alien ground, but rather quiet extensions of human consciousness, small fragments of awareness that humanity has carefully placed on another world, allowing curiosity itself to walk where human bodies cannot yet go. And in this sense, every image they send, every measurement they collect, every tiny sample they analyze becomes a gentle thread connecting two planets, weaving a subtle bridge of understanding across millions of kilometers of empty space. You may find that as you imagine this slow and delicate exchange of information between Mars and Earth, your own thoughts begin to slow in response, as though your mind is naturally synchronizing with the unhurried pace of planetary time, releasing the need to rush, releasing the need to accomplish, releasing the pressure to constantly move forward, and instead settling into a quieter mode of existence where simply being aware feels sufficient, where simply breathing feels meaningful, and where nothing else is required in this moment. You may begin to feel how even the concept of distance softens here, because while Mars is physically far from Earth, it feels close in a different way. Close in the sense that the same physical laws shape both worlds, close in the sense that the same elements exist on both planets, close in the sense that the atoms inside your body were forged in ancient stars, just as the atoms inside Martian rocks were forged in ancient stars. And within this shared origin, you may sense a quiet unity that dissolves the idea of separation. And so you remain here, gently aware of small machines resting on ancient ground, of silent signals traveling through space, of planets circling stars, of stars drifting within galaxies, and of your own soft breathing moving in and out, all of it unfolding together within one immense patient universe that does not hurry, does not demand, and does not require anything from you except that you exist.
Part 7. Humans on Mars, the dream of walking there. As the quiet presence of robotic explorers continues its patient work across the vast plains and ancient valleys of Mars, you may begin to sense another presence as well. Not physical, not immediate,
but carried softly within human imagination. A presence made of dreams, of longings, of quiet questions that have been whispered for generations. What would it feel like to walk on Mars? Not through images on a screen, not through the eyes of a machine, but with human eyes, human hands, human breath. For thousands of years, Mars has appeared in Earth's night sky as a small red point of light. Ancient civilizations watched it rise and fall. They gave it names. They associated it with gods, with war, with fate, with change. Long before anyone understood what Mars truly was, it already held a place in human storytelling. As centuries passed and telescopes revealed Mars as a world rather than a wandering star, imagination began to shift. Mars became a destination, not a mystical realm, but a physical place, a planet that could, one day, be visited. The idea did not appear suddenly, it grew slowly. First came dreams of spaceflight, then small rockets, then satellites, then humans in orbit, then footsteps on the moon, each step expanding the boundary of what felt possible. Mars began to feel closer, not in distance, but in possibility. To imagine humans on Mars is not to imagine conquest, not flags, not domination, but presence. Quiet presence. Small groups of people living inside carefully designed habitats, sealed environments, pressurized spaces, places where every breath is precious, every drop of water is recycled. Life on Mars would not be dramatic. It would be routine, structured, measured. People would wake, check systems, exercise, work, rest. They would look out small windows at endless rust-colored plains. They would not step outside casually. Every excursion would require preparation. Spacesuits, tools, checklists. Communication delays with Earth would last minutes. Real-time conversation would be impossible. Homesickness would exist. People would miss Earth's sky, Earth's oceans, rain, wind through trees. Yet they would also experience something no human has before. They would see Earth as a star. They would stand on another world. They would be the first, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. Mars would not become Earth. Mars would not replace Earth. Mars would become a place of presence, a reminder of human curiosity, a quiet extension of awareness into the solar system. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently. The dream remains.
As you continue resting within this gentle awareness, you may begin to sense how the idea of humans on Mars is less about heroic images or dramatic moments, and more about a quiet, persistent longing that has lived within human consciousness for countless generations, a longing to understand what lies beyond familiar horizons, a longing to touch worlds that exist only as distant points of light in the night sky, and a longing to feel, even briefly, what it is like to stand somewhere no human has ever stood before. Long before rockets existed, humans looked up at Mars with the naked eye. They watched its slow movement against the background of stars. They noticed its reddish color. They wove stories around it, not because they understood it, but because they wondered. Wonder is older than science. Wonder is older than technology. Wonder is one of the most ancient human instincts. Over time, wonder turned into observation. Observation turned into measurement. Measurement turned into understanding. And understanding slowly opened the door to possibility. The dream of walking on Mars did not emerge from a single moment of inspiration. It grew gradually, built from thousands of small discoveries, from each improvement in telescope design, from each successful rocket launch, from each mission that traveled a little farther than the last. It is a dream assembled piece by piece, like a mosaic. To imagine humans on Mars is to imagine patience, not just the patience required to travel there, but the patience required to live there. Mars would not feel like a frontier town. It would not feel like an adventure park. It would feel like an isolated research station, quiet, remote, highly controlled. Life would revolve around systems, air systems, water systems, power systems. Every system would have backups, backups for backups. Redundancy would be survival. People would live inside habitats filled with soft artificial light, white walls, narrow corridors, small personal spaces, not luxurious but functional. Comfort would be simple, practical, a warm place to sleep, a warm meal, a connection to Earth through delayed messages. People would work long hours maintaining equipment, monitoring life support, conducting experiments, repairing, adjusting. Mars would demand responsibility. Carelessness would not be forgiven. Yet within this demanding environment, small moments of beauty would exist. A sunrise through a habitat window, dust drifting across the surface, Phobos crossing the sky, the first green leaf grown in Martian soil inside a greenhouse. These moments would not be grand, but they would be deeply meaningful. Humans on Mars would not be heroes every day. Most days they would simply be workers, scientists, engineers, technicians, people doing their jobs, making mistakes, learning, adapting. Slowly, very slowly. Communication with Earth would feel like sending messages across time. Questions asked today would be answered many minutes later. Laughter sent across space would arrive long after the moment had passed. Mars would teach a different relationship with time, a slower one, a more deliberate one. Homesickness would be real, even among those who chose to go. People would miss the smell of rain, the sound of wind in trees, the feeling of walking outside without protection. They would miss the casual presence of other humans. Yet they would also gain something rare, perspective. They would look up at a sky where Earth is a tiny star. They would understand in a deeply personal way how fragile and precious Earth truly is. Humans on Mars would not mean abandoning Earth. It would mean expanding awareness, extending presence, not escaping problems, not starting over, but learning. Mars would not save humanity, but Mars might teach humanity. It might teach patience, cooperation, humility, responsibility. And perhaps in quiet moments, humans on Mars would stand outside in their suits, looking across endless red plains, and feel the same quiet awe you feel now, simply imagining it. They would not feel powerful, they would not feel dominant, they would feel small. And in that smallness, they would feel connected. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently. The dream continues.
As you continue to imagine humans living quietly on this distant world, you may begin to feel how the idea of being human slowly expands beyond the boundaries of a single planet, beyond the familiar blue sky and green landscapes of Earth, and becomes something wider and more spacious, a form of awareness capable of existing wherever curiosity reaches, wherever consciousness wanders, and wherever the gentle desire to understand the universe finds a place to rest. You may sense that humans on Mars would not feel like conquerors standing on a new frontier, but more like careful guests stepping softly into an ancient house, aware that everything around them existed long before their arrival and will continue to exist long after they are gone. And within this awareness, there may arise a quiet respect for the planet itself, not as a resource to be consumed, but as a presence to be observed and learned from.
As this awareness deepens, you may notice how the image of a human habitat on Mars begins to feel less like a technological achievement and more like a fragile pocket of warmth and light floating within an immense cold universe, a small island of breath and heartbeat surrounded by silence, where every human life is precious, every connection meaningful, and every ordinary moment quietly extraordinary. You may begin to feel how living on Mars would naturally slow human life down because speed would no longer be useful, impulsiveness would no longer be safe, and patience would become one of the most valuable skills a person could possess, shaping not only how people work but how they speak, how they listen, and how they treat one another. In this slower rhythm, you may sense how humans on Mars would gradually come to understand that survival is not an individual achievement, but a shared process, a continuous act of cooperation in which every person depends on countless others, and where kindness, reliability, and trust become as essential as air and water. And so you remain here, gently imagining humans standing beneath a pale red sky, breathing inside softly lit habitats, sending quiet messages across space, and carrying with them the same ancient curiosity that once made humans look up at the stars for the first time, all while you yourself rest calmly within this moment, aware that the dream of humans on Mars is, at its core, a dream about understanding our place in the universe. As you continue to rest within the image of humans quietly inhabiting this distant world, you may begin to sense how the idea of home slowly transforms from a fixed geographical place into something more fluid and expansive, something that is not defined solely by oceans and forests or familiar skies, but by the presence of shared breath, shared awareness, and shared intention, so that even within a small pressurized habitat surrounded by endless red desert, home can gently arise wherever people gather in cooperation, patience, and quiet understanding. You may notice how the vast emptiness surrounding a Martian settlement would not necessarily feel threatening, but instead would create a powerful contrast that makes each small human gesture more meaningful, so that a simple conversation, a shared meal, or a quiet moment of laughter inside a softly lit module becomes amplified by the immense silence outside, reminding those who live there that meaning is not measured by scale, but by connection. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to feel how the first humans on Mars would carry with them not only technology and tools, but also the accumulated history of Earth, the languages, the stories, the music, the memories, and the countless generations of curiosity that slowly built the path toward this moment, so that when they stand beneath the Martian sky, they are not alone as individuals, but quietly accompanied by the invisible weight of human history that stretches back to the earliest ancestors who first looked upward in wonder. You may sense that in such a distant environment, stripped of many distractions and comforts, human beings would come to experience themselves more clearly, because there would be fewer layers of noise to hide behind, fewer excess choices to scatter attention, and more time to sit with silence, to reflect, to observe, and to understand both the planet around them and the quiet interior landscape of their own thoughts. In this slower and more deliberate way of living, you may begin to imagine how values might subtly shift, how competition might soften into collaboration, how urgency might give way to steadiness, and how success might no longer be defined by accumulation or speed, but by sustainability, reliability, and the gentle ability to maintain life in a place that does not easily support it. And so you remain here, softly imagining humans breathing inside small habitats beneath a vast red sky, feeling both the fragility and the resilience of life extended beyond Earth, while you yourself rest peacefully within this awareness, recognizing that the dream of humans on Mars is ultimately a reflection of something deeply human, the quiet desire to explore not for domination but for understanding, and to expand not for power but for perspective. Part 8. Terraforming Dreams. Can Mars be changed? As you continue to imagine future humans standing quietly on the Martian surface, living inside softly illuminated habitats beneath a pale red sky, you may begin to wonder whether Mars must always remain as it is now, cold, thin-aired, and silent, or whether, over immense stretches of time, it could be changed. Terraforming, a word that carries enormous weight. It means reshaping a world, gradually, carefully, over centuries, perhaps millennia. The idea is not about quick transformation, not about sudden miracles, but about slow planetary engineering. If Mars once had a thicker atmosphere, if it once held liquid water on its surface, could some of those conditions be restored? The greatest challenge is the atmosphere. Mars lost much of its air long ago. Without a strong magnetic field, solar wind stripped it away particle by particle. To terraform Mars, a thicker atmosphere would need to be created. Some propose releasing carbon dioxide trapped in polar ice and underground deposits. Others imagine creating artificial greenhouse gases. Some even imagine placing a giant magnetic shield in space to protect Mars from the sun. All of these ideas are immense, difficult, uncertain. Even if attempted, Mars would never become exactly like Earth. Its gravity is lower, its sunlight weaker, its soil contains toxic chemicals. Terraforming would not create a second Earth, it would create a new kind of world. And beneath all technical questions lies a deeper one. Should Mars be changed at all? Mars has existed for billions of years without us. It does not ask to be changed. It does not ask to be warmed. It does not ask to be filled with life. It simply exists. And in that existence, there is dignity. Perhaps humans would decide never to terraform Mars. Perhaps Mars would remain a place of study, of observation, of quiet presence. A world where humans visit, live in habitats, leave lightly. Perhaps that is enough. You may notice how the idea of terraforming slowly shifts from a technical concept into a philosophical one. It becomes less about what humans can do and more about who humans choose to be. A species that reshapes everything it touches, or a species that learns to coexist with what already exists. There is no immediate answer, and there does not need to be. Mars moves slowly. The universe moves slowly. You are allowed to move slowly too. You do not need to solve Mars tonight. You do not need to decide its future. It is enough to wonder, enough to imagine possibilities, enough to sit quietly with the question itself. You breathe slowly, calmly, gently. Mars remains, unchanged, turning beneath a distant sun, and you remain here, resting within the vast space of not knowing. As you continue to rest within the idea of a world slowly changing over immense spans of time, you may begin to sense how terraforming, rather than feeling like an act of domination, begins to feel more like a quiet dialogue between humanity and a planet, a conversation spoken not in words, but in chemistry, energy, patience, and restraint, where each small intervention would be answered by countless natural processes unfolding in their own slow and complex ways. You may notice how the scale of such a project gently dissolves the human tendency toward urgency, because when change is measured in centuries and millennia, there is no meaningful place for haste, only room for careful thought, long-term responsibility, and an acceptance that no single person or generation could ever claim ownership over the outcome. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to feel how the question of whether Mars should be changed is inseparable from the question of how humanity understands its relationship with the universe itself, whether as a force that reshapes everything it encounters, or as a presence that learns to observe, adapt, and coexist. You may sense that Mars, in its current cold and silent state, already possesses a quiet completeness, a kind of wholeness that does not depend on oceans or forests or breathable air,
but exists simply in the fact that it has followed its own long and intricate planetary story. In this sense, terraforming becomes less about making Mars more like Earth and more about reflecting on what it means to be human, on how curiosity, power, humility, and care intertwine, and on whether the deepest form of progress might sometimes be learning when not to change something. And so you remain here, gently holding the possibility of many futures in your awareness, breathing slowly, calmly, softly, allowing Mars to remain both a place of imagination and a place of quiet mystery. As you continue to rest within this vast question of planetary change, you may begin to sense how Mars does not hurry toward any particular future, how it simply continues to orbit the Sun, turning slowly beneath thin clouds and drifting dust, carrying its ancient history within every grain of soil, and in doing so, quietly reminding you that existence does not require improvement in order to be valid. You may notice how the idea of reshaping an entire world gradually softens into a gentler curiosity about what it means to encounter something vast and ancient without needing to transform it, to stand in the presence of another planet and allow it to remain itself. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to feel how patience itself becomes a form of wisdom, a recognition that some processes are not meant to be accelerated, that some stories are not meant to be rewritten, and that some mysteries are not meant to be resolved quickly. You may sense that whether Mars is ever terraformed or remains as it is now, its existence already holds meaning simply by being part of the immense tapestry of the universe, one thread among countless others, each following its own quiet path. In this wider perspective, you may realize that the universe does not measure success in terms of usefulness, productivity, or transformation, but simply in terms of existence itself. And so you remain here, breathing slowly, calmly, gently, allowing Mars to be Mars, allowing the future to remain open, and allowing yourself to rest within the peaceful space of not knowing. As you remain gently aware of Mars continuing its slow orbit around a distant sun, you may begin to feel how the concept of a future gradually loosens its sharp edges, becoming less like a destination that must be reached and more like a wide open landscape of possibility in which countless outcomes can quietly exist at once, none demanding to be chosen, none insisting on arrival, none requiring resolution. You may notice how the idea of shaping an entire world begins to feel smaller and quieter than the simple act of witnessing one, as though observation itself carries a subtle form of respect, a silent acknowledgement that something vast and ancient does not need to be altered in order to be worthy of attention. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to feel how your own life, like the life of a planet, is not defined solely by what changes, but also by what remains, by the steady presence of breath, by the ongoing rhythm of awareness, by the quiet continuity of simply existing. You may feel how control slowly gives way to curiosity, how the desire to direct outcomes softens into a willingness to coexist with uncertainty, and how this shift brings with it a gentle sense of ease. In this ease, you may realize that not knowing is not a failure, but a natural and beautiful state, a spaciousness in which imagination can drift freely without needing to settle. And so you remain here, resting within a universe that unfolds at its own pace, breathing slowly, calmly, gently, allowing Mars, the future, and yourself to simply be.
Part 9. The Far Future of Mars. As you continue resting within this vast and gentle awareness, you may begin to sense how your attention slowly drifts forward through time, not quickly, not forcefully, but in the same quiet way that starlight drifts across space, allowing you to imagine Mars not only as it exists now, but as it will exist long after every human story has faded into history, long after every city has turned back into dust, long after every familiar landmark on Earth has been reshaped by erosion in time. Mars will continue to orbit the Sun, year after year, million after million, billion after billion. Its path will remain steady, its motion unhurried. The planet will slowly lose the last traces of internal heat still hidden deep within its core. Volcanoes, already silent, will remain silent. Marsquakes, faint and rare, will eventually fade entirely. The interior will cool, the crust will grow thicker, the planet will become increasingly still, not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. In the far future, Mars will be a world of deep geological quiet. No flowing lava, no rising magma, no internal stirring. Only solid rock, frozen ground, and vast stretches of silent terrain. The thin atmosphere Mars possesses today will likely continue to thin even further. The solar wind will keep brushing against the planet, carrying away small amounts of gas over immense periods of time, molecule by molecule, particle by particle. The sky may grow even clearer, even darker, even closer to the blackness of open space. Stars will appear sharper, more numerous. The boundary between planet and cosmos will feel even thinner. Mars will not notice this change. Mars does not experience loss. Mars does not remember its past. Mars does not anticipate its future. Mars simply follows physics. The polar ice caps will continue to change. They may shrink during some long epochs, they may grow during others. Mars's axial tilt will slowly shift over millions of years, altering how sunlight reaches different latitudes. Ice may migrate. Glaciers may form in new regions, then slowly retreat, then form again somewhere else. Mars will continue to rearrange its frozen water like a quiet, endless puzzle. Phobos will continue its slow inward spiral. Over tens of millions of years, tidal forces will draw it closer to Mars. Eventually, Phobos may break apart. Its fragile structure may be torn into countless fragments. Those fragments may briefly form a thin ring around Mars, a faint halo of dust and stone. Not bright, not dramatic, but subtle, temporary. Over time, much of that material may fall back onto the surface. Mars will absorb its own moon. Deimos will continue its distant orbit, slow, steady, quiet, unless some distant gravitational interaction alters its path. Asteroids will still occasionally strike Mars, not often, not violently in a way that reshapes the entire planet, but now and then, each impact adding a new crater, a new scar, a new chapter. Mars will continue collecting the quiet signatures of time. Far beyond even this future, the Sun itself will begin to change. Hydrogen in its core will gradually become depleted. The Sun will slowly swell. Its outer layers will expand. Mercury will be lost. Venus will likely be lost. Earth may be lost. Mars may survive, or Mars may be scorched. The exact outcome is uncertain, but the solar system will not remain as it is. Eventually, the Sun will shed its outer layers, leaving behind a dense white dwarf, a small, hot stellar remnant. Mars, if it still exists, will orbit this faint object, no longer bathed in warm sunlight, no longer receiving enough energy to gently warm its surface. Mars will become even colder, even darker, a frozen world circling a dying star. Beyond even that, trillions of years into the future,
Stars across the universe will slowly burn out. Galaxies will drift farther apart. Black holes will gradually evaporate. The universe will grow colder, quieter, more empty. Mars, or whatever remains of it, will simply be another cold object in a vast, dark cosmos. Not special, not important, and yet, right now, in this moment, Mars feels meaningful. Because meaning does not come from permanence. Meaning comes from awareness, from experience, from the ability to imagine, from the ability to contemplate deep time and feel curiosity rather than fear. Mars does not care about its future, but you do. You are capable of holding billions of years inside a single thought. You are capable of imagining worlds long after you are gone. You are capable of feeling wonder about things you will never see. That alone is extraordinary. You do not need to solve the future. You do not need to understand cosmic endings. You do not need to reach any conclusion. It is enough to rest inside the vastness of time. It is enough to feel how small you are and how precious that smallness is. As you remain here, gently breathing, calmly existing, you may begin to sense that the far future of Mars is not something distant and abstract, but simply another expression of the same slow, patient universe that is unfolding around you right now. Nothing is in a hurry. Nothing is late. Nothing is wrong. Everything is simply becoming, and you are allowed to rest within that becoming. Quiet, safe, unrushed, floating gently inside a universe that continues its endless, silent journey.
As you allow your awareness to drift even farther forward through unimaginable stretches of time, you may begin to sense how the surface of Mars will slowly change in ways so gradual that no single moment could ever capture the transformation. Because erosion on a world with such a thin atmosphere does not rush or roar, but instead unfolds in subtle shifts of dust, in the quiet settling of particles after distant impacts, in the gentle collapse of crater walls over millions of years, and in the almost imperceptible migration of sand dunes that move grain by grain across plains that themselves have existed longer than complex life has existed on Earth. The great volcanoes, including Olympus Mons and the towering giants of the Tharsis region, will remain standing for eons, their immense slopes unchanged by flowing water or thick air, preserved in a kind of geological stillness that feels almost eternal from a human perspective. Yet even these colossal structures will not be immune to time, for micrometeorites will continue to strike, tiny fractures will continue to form, thermal expansion and contraction will continue to stress the rock, and slowly, almost tenderly, the sharpness of their features will soften, not dramatically, not suddenly, but with the quiet inevitability that defines all physical forms. Valles Marineris, that vast canyon stretching across the planet like a silent scar, will deepen in shadow as the sun gradually brightens over billions of years, and its walls will occasionally shed fragments of stone that tumble downward in slow cascades, adding thin layers of debris to its floor, while fine dust carried by faint winds settles into crevices and along ledges, smoothing edges, muting contrasts, and turning sharp geological history into gentler contours that speak of age rather than force. The great volcanoes, including Olympus Mons and the towering giants of the Tharsis region, will remain standing for eons, their immense slopes unchanged by flowing water or thick air, preserved in a kind of geological stillness that feels almost eternal from a human perspective. Yet even these colossal structures will not be immune to time, for micrometeorites will continue to strike, tiny fractures will continue to form, thermal expansion and contraction will continue to stress the rock, and slowly, almost tenderly, the sharpness of their features will soften, not dramatically, not suddenly, but with the quiet inevitability that defines all physical forms. If humans never return to Mars after some distant era, the faint tracks left by rovers and early explorers will eventually fade beneath drifting dust, not erased violently, but gently covered over by layers of fine particles carried by quiet winds, until the surface once again appears untouched, as though curiosity itself had passed lightly across it and then withdrawn without leaving a permanent mark. And as the sun evolves towards its red giant phase, swelling outward and altering the delicate balance of energy within the solar system, Mars may experience a brief period of relative warmth, a fleeting chapter in its long history during which surface ice sublimates more rapidly, perhaps thickening the atmosphere slightly for a time, perhaps allowing transient liquid water to appear in sheltered basins, not as a restoration of ancient oceans, but as a temporary whisper of them, a final echo of the conditions that once shaped valleys and deltas billions of years earlier. During this distant future, the sky of Mars would change in subtle ways, becoming brighter as the sun expands, casting longer and more intense light across the plains, altering the color of the horizon and the intensity of shadows, while the surface absorbs and radiates heat in patterns different from anything seen in the present era, reminding you that even stars, which seem so steady and eternal in the night sky, are themselves evolving, shifting, aging, and moving toward transformations that unfold across cosmic timescales far beyond ordinary comprehension. Eventually, when the sun sheds its outer layers and contracts into a white dwarf, Mars, if it remains gravitationally bound within the system, will orbit a faint and cooling stellar remnant, receiving only a fraction of the warmth it once knew, becoming colder still, its atmosphere perhaps reduced to a whisper of gas clinging weakly to the surface, its ice locked more firmly into frozen ground, its landscape illuminated only dimly by a small, pale star that once filled half the sky with golden light. In that distant epoch, Mars would be a silent relic of a once vibrant planetary system, circling quietly in an expanding universe where galaxies drift farther apart and the night sky grows darker as fewer new stars are born. And yet, even in that immense darkness, the planet would still exist, still composed of atoms forged in ancient stellar furnaces, still participating in the slow gravitational dance that binds matter together across cosmic distances. You may begin to feel how the far future of Mars is not tragic, not lonely, not dramatic, but simply another phase in a long and continuous unfolding, because the universe does not measure success in warmth or life or visibility, but only in existence itself, in the persistence of matter and energy following laws that do not hurry and do not hesitate. And as you rest within this awareness, imagining a future so vast that it dissolves ordinary scales of time, you may notice how your own breathing remains steady, how your own moment of consciousness remains quietly present, and how within the immensity of billions of years, there is still space for this single gentle awareness to exist, without pressure, without urgency, and without the need to become anything other than what it already is.
As you continue to rest within this vast, forward-looking awareness, you may begin to feel how the idea of distance in time becomes less important than the feeling of continuity, because whether something happens tomorrow or in 10 billion years, it is still part of the same uninterrupted unfolding of the universe, the same slow breath that carries galaxies apart and draws particles together. You may notice how Mars, even in its farthest future, does not become meaningless simply because it grows colder or darker. For meaning does not arise from brightness or activity, but from participation in existence itself, from being one small but real expression of the cosmic whole. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to sense how the universe is not moving toward a goal in the way human minds often imagine goals, but is instead endlessly expressing possibility, exploring combinations of matter and energy without preference, without judgment, and without a final destination.
You may feel how this perspective gently releases the need to interpret the far future as either hopeful or hopeless, good or bad, because such labels belong to human storytelling, while the universe itself simply continues. In this gentle acceptance, you may notice how your own presence feels lighter, as though you no longer need to carry the weight of cosmic outcomes, and can instead rest within the simple fact that you are here, breathing calmly, gently, allowing Mars to drift through its distant future, allowing stars to be born and fade, allowing galaxies to separate, and allowing yourself to rest within the vast, quiet continuity of a universe that simply continues, without hurry and without end. As you continue drifting even deeper into this immense perspective, you may begin to feel how the concept of duration itself slowly dissolves, because when time stretches beyond any scale the human mind can comfortably hold, it no longer feels like a sequence of passing moments, and instead begins to feel like a vast open presence in which all changes simply arise and fade, one after another, without urgency and without resistance. You may notice how Mars, in its unimaginable future, does not stand as a monument to loss or decay, but rather as a quiet participant in an endless cosmic process, a process that does not judge worlds by whether they are warm or cold, alive or barren, bright or dark, but simply allows each form to exist for as long as the laws of physics permit. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to sense how every atom within Mars and within your own body shares a common ancestry in ancient stars that exploded long before the sun was born, and that long after Mars has become a frozen relic, and long after Earth has changed beyond recognition, those same atoms will continue to drift through the universe, becoming parts of new clouds, new stars, and perhaps new worlds, carrying forward a quiet continuity that never truly ends. You may feel how this realization gently softens the idea of endings, because even when forms disappear, the underlying substance remains, rearranging itself into new patterns, new structures, new expressions of existence, none of which are more or less important than any other. In this perspective, you may begin to understand that permanence is not required for significance, and that a moment does not need to last forever in order to matter. And so you remain here, breathing slowly, calmly, gently, allowing Mars to drift through its distant future, allowing stars to be born and fade, allowing galaxies to separate, and allowing yourself to rest within the vast, quiet continuity of a universe that simply continues, without hurry and without end.
As you continue resting within this ever-widening awareness, you may begin to sense how even the idea of a far future slowly softens, becoming less like a distant destination and more like a gentle extension of the present moment. Because in truth, the universe is always unfolding only now, always expressing itself only in this single, continuous flow of becoming. You may notice how Mars, regardless of how cold, dark, or silent it eventually becomes, never truly leaves existence, but simply shifts form, shifts state, shifts expression, participating endlessly in the quiet recycling of matter and energy that defines the cosmos. As this awareness deepens, you may begin to feel how your own presence is woven into this same vast process, not as something separate or temporary, but as a small, conscious expression of the same forces that shape planets and stars. You may feel how the question of what ultimately happens to Mars becomes less important than the feeling of being aware that anything exists at all. In this gentle recognition, you may notice how a deep calm begins to spread through your awareness, because nothing needs to be solved, nothing needs to be fixed, and nothing needs to be decided. And so you remain here, quietly breathing,
softly existing, allowing the far future of Mars and the far future of the universe to remain open, while you rest peacefully within the simple miracle of being.
Part 10. The Quiet Return Home. As you slowly allow your awareness to drift away from the farthest edges of time and space, you may begin to feel a gentle turning inward. Not as a sudden shift, not as a sharp transition, but as a soft and natural return, like a slow exhale after a long, peaceful breath. You have traveled across ancient plains. You have stood beneath thin skies. You have wandered through deep canyons. You have imagined lost rivers. You have watched silent moons drift overhead. You have followed Mars through billions of years of quiet change. And now, without needing to move, without needing to do anything at all, you simply rest. You may notice how your body feels. Perhaps heavy, perhaps light, perhaps warm, perhaps relaxed. There is no correct sensation. Whatever you feel is fine. Whatever you feel is allowed. You may become gently aware of your breathing, not changing it, not controlling it, just noticing. In and out. Slow, easy, natural. You may notice how your thoughts are quieter now. Not necessarily gone, but softer, less urgent, less demanding. They can come. They can go. You do not need to follow them. You do not need to solve anything. You do not need to understand everything. You have already done enough simply by being here. Mars continues its slow orbit around a distant sun. Earth continues its gentle rotation beneath drifting clouds. Stars continue their quiet burning. Galaxies continue their slow drifting apart. And within all of this motion, you remain here, breathing, existing, aware. You may begin to feel how small you are, and how beautiful that smallness is. Not insignificant, not meaningless, but delicate, precious, brief, like a quiet note in an endless piece of music. You are not separate from the universe. You are not outside of it. You are an expression of it. The atoms that form your body were once inside stars. The same forces that guide planets through space also move within you. You belong. You have always belonged. You do not need to earn your place. You do not need to justify your existence. You are here, and that is enough. As this awareness settles gently around you, you may begin to feel a deep sense of safety. Not because nothing bad could ever happen, not because everything is perfect, but because in this moment, you are okay. You are breathing. You are supported. You are allowed to rest. Nothing is required of you right now. No decisions, no responsibilities, no expectations. Just rest, just presence, just gentle awareness. You may imagine yourself lying somewhere comfortable, perhaps on a soft surface, perhaps wrapped in warmth, perhaps surrounded by quiet. You do not need to picture anything clearly. A vague sense is enough. Your body knows how to relax. Your mind knows how to drift. You do not need to guide either one. If thoughts appear, let them pass like distant clouds. If images appear, let them fade. If nothing appears, that is also fine. Silence is fine. Stillness is fine.
You have taken a long journey, not through space, not through distance, but through imagination, through curiosity, through quiet awareness. And now, gently, you return, not to a place, not to a task, not to effort, but to rest. You may feel yourself sinking a little deeper into comfort, a little deeper into calm, a little deeper into ease. There is nowhere you need to go. There is nothing you need to become. There is nothing you need to achieve. You can simply be, breathing, resting, drifting, safe, calm, unrushed. As the universe continues its endless, silent unfolding, you are held within it, and you are allowed to sleep, gently, peacefully, quietly. Good night.